million of unassigned fund balance. That's not construction. That's because we did the tennis courts that the board did vote for. It was over $700,000, and then decrease in our funding due to the decrease in ADA due to lower enrollment and low attendance. Next year we're at $517,000. Now the number below that is the numbers we just talked about related to the bond project and construction. So those are the 1.68 for this year, 2.8 for next year, for a total of just under 4.5 million. Does that make sense?
So is what you're saying for 21-22, you're estimating about 3.3 million total fund
correct.
balance out of the general fund,
Correct.
regardless of unassigned or
Committed.
committed.
Yeah.
And then another 3.3 million
Correct.
for 22-23.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And while we're still talking about the general fund, so remember that we planned for a 5% decrease in ADA just because historically the last 5 or 6 years, Lamesa has declined by about that much in their ADA. And ADA is average daily attendance. So we're funded according to ADA, which is basically kids and seats. We're not funded on enrollment. So I estimate our funding based on ADA. So I looked at our ADA from last year. I decreased it by 5%, and that's where we're getting this $517,000 deficit in the unassigned portion. After the first 6 weeks of school, we run reports and we look at our average daily attendance. And if that number is different than what I estimated according to historical trends, we will update our revenue and our expenses. If we don't have to, we can do a surplus or whatever. And we're going to do that in October after we get through our first 6 weeks, and we will have a budget amendment in our October board meeting that will reflect actuals. Now, our numbers right now do indicate that we're not going to have a 5% decrease in ADA. We may break even. They look really good. So let's say that we stay the same as we did last year. If we do stay the same as we did for 21-22, at our October board meeting, we will no longer have a deficit and we will have a surplus unless we decide to put expenses against that revenue that is above what we're adopting today. Does that make sense?
So in a nutshell, what she's saying is that when we build these budgets, we have to use historical trends. Historical trend has been a 5% decrease in student enrollment. We saw that number, which was part of the 1.6 million, or most of that 1.6 million was reduction in student numbers last year. That obviously we didn't, and we count above what we had counted for. So I've already sent y'all the enrollment projection so far. We're pretty much a wash from what we ended last year and where we are right now this year, which is really good news because that means that we may have reversed the historical trend of the 5%. So what she's saying is, if theoretically, if you wanted to today, you could go back and say, well, it looks good, let's go ahead and adopt a balanced budget. Well, we know historically we need to wait 6 weeks into the school year, and the state makes us do that now. Used to, you didn't do these audits, or you didn't do these changes in the middle of the year. You just kind of wrote it out to the end of the school year. Now they have you look at 6 weeks and you go adjust your revenue.
Yeah, so the first reading, we'll take a hit on our revenue on the first reading if you're not within a certain variance, and that happened, I think, maybe 3 years ago. So that's why we did that in October. Didn't do that 5 years.
That's real important. But what she's saying in a nutshell is based on the numbers we have like today, if they hold true after Labor Day and through the first 6 weeks, that $517,691 deficit that we're adopting tonight will no longer be.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance.
I think it's better than good because, if we get to Labor Day and have those numbers, they typically hold true for the most of the remainder of the year. So that's a good trend. It's all good. It's just good news, but we can't adopt a balanced budget on that possibility. We got to base it off. We already based it off historical trends, but it looks good. It looks like, in 6 weeks we'll be able to give it hopefully a good report that we've got pretty much a balanced budget.
Did we start out still a little more this year than what we did last year, or it's still?
No, like we're four kids under where we were at the end of school last year. But we anticipate after Labor Day probably picking up a few more kids. We have some kids that traditionally don't come to school until after Labor Day. Used to school started after Labor Day, so some people never change that trend. So Labor Day is always the key barometer for us. So I just want to make sure y'all understand that, and the community understands that the deficit budget is all based on decreased enrollment. Now, I will give kudos to Mr. Solis and all the principals and everything else, because we did reduce, how much total was
We
it?
reduced payroll for just under 1.6, and there is some of that I put into federal programs, but most of it is absorption.
So about $1.6 million, the school reduced spending and all that mainly is staff. And so we absorbed a lot of staff to get to that number. There's no way to do anything but that. So a little bit bigger classes, not lot bigger, but a little bit bigger classes and across the board to get that done. So.
Do you have any questions at all on the general fund? It's the most volatile, crazy budget I've ever done because of our storm repair, our insurance claim, because of ESSER and all. We have twice as many federal programs because of our bond project, and then just the ramifications of COVID. So,
And did y'all already meet with?
Insurance? We did. We had about 8 people in here, and we made a lot of progress, but we didn't get any answers. We found out, in a nutshell, that they have we have 3 different deductibles, and so we knew that, but they want a lot. We need a lot from them of what we need to give them and how we need to categorize things, because they've got whether it's flood, whether it's hail and wind, or whether it was rising water. Those are different areas, and then they have got to come down, and we got to give them a detailed breakout from Lee Lewis on the middle school library.
yeah, I have another meeting with them Friday morning, and Cole Borland and then Ray Gonzalez are going to meet with them as well, and we're just going to.
They want stuff. They want to categorize it in buckets. They call them buckets, where they know where each one of these things goes, so they know how to allocate. So we're still in the process, but we did get an understanding of one another a lot better with everybody in the room. So.
We talked about this last time. I budgeted $2 million in planned revenue and planned expenses for the storm, and I told y'all I just made up that number. I really had no way of knowing. But I do know our roof bids came in, so we have that number, and then we also have the cost of the middle school, so it's pretty close to that.
So you're expecting between 21-22 and 22-23, a total of about $6.5 million between the 2 years.
Between
I'm
the
just
2
looking
years.
at totals.
Yeah, between the
But
2
then
years.
once that is done, the construction's finished, and we'll be done with
Yeah, I say that.
major amounts coming out of fund balance.
Yes, and I do expect that number to change with the increase in revenue from increased ADA. So, if we hold the level.
Plus you got insurance money coming too.
Yeah. So if we hold level, so I've got that in the revenue and the expense
You've
side.
already got that in there?
In the revenue and expense side. Yeah, so it's just a wash in the budget. But it looks really weird when you're looking at our expenditures every year, because it looks like we have all this revenue and all these expenses. But in a normal year, we wouldn't have that because we wouldn't have the insurance claim. So yeah, you can add those 2 together, and that's what I would expect. The only thing that I foresee changing is about $800,000 in more in revenue if we hold steady in our ADA from last year. That's what it's worth. And I'm just gonna have a full disclaimer right now. We have not had our audit. So the entries that I'm estimating, I don't do those until September. So if we end up using a little bit less of fund balance, or this is an estimate pending about 6 more weeks of work. So I don't think it'll change much. But
you've got most of your big adjustments made though, right?
Most of
your big adjustments.
Yeah. But
those are not going to make it move one way or the other much, I wouldn't think.
Well, I said I didn't think it would move much, but it's not going to be exactly 1.680 or 1.1616 if it changes a little bit.
But if attendance holds steady,
We'll
the
add
517 will
will be.
We'll actually be up a
Yeah.
couple $100,000 or something, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, we'll be in communication with y'all. I've got POs that, you know, I'm gonna have to move into the next year. If there's anything that comes up that's not in the budget, it's gonna be a year of, you know, communicating and making sure that if wasn't something I planned for, I do kind of think that we might have some technology things that there's no way for me to know about. I visited with our new technology director. So as those things come up, we'll talk to y'all.
Yeah, there's some pretty big deficiencies in our technology just unveiled over the last month. So there's going to be some. We're hoping. We have not utilized E-rate in about 8 years, which I don't know what E-rate is, but it's where there's probably about close to $300,000 out there for our district for capital improvements, servers, firewalls, switches, those type of things that are actually paid for at about 80 to 85% on the dollar. So for every dollar spent, 85% of it is paid for on the E-rate side. And we have never utilized it. And we've got some severe infrastructure issues as far as some of our devices, some of our switches are just, one of them's 15 years old, and it's a primary switch that if it goes down, the whole system's down. And so we're in the process of evaluating and getting that up to speed so that like our wireless access works correctly and stuff like that. But I do think there'll be some expenses there this year that maybe we're unknown because he came in so late. So anyway, and just one more disclaimer, just to make sure everybody realizes this, and I think I talked about it last month. When the bond committee got together in 2018, and we had numerous meetings of community members, we had started off with a $34 million bond, and they came back and said, can we reduce that to 30.4, and the school district take $4 million out of the bond and allocate those projects outside of the bond that we pay for fund balance. That was a recommendation from the bond committee, the 30 members. We absolutely set those out, put them aside, and that was, of course, 4 years ago. And in the process of these 4 years, that's been $4 million of the fund balance that we knew that we told the bond committee we would spend on our half by letting the community support the bond. So that was our part. Now, where did the other extra $1 or $2 million come from? Well, there's been some projects added along the way, not necessarily by Liz or I, but by maybe board members' recommendations. For example, the tennis courts. When we were going through renovating all these facilities, deservedly so, when we started the bond, we didn't have a tennis program. And we had hired someone that's revitalized the tennis program, and the tennis courts they're subpar. They were very subpar and didn't have lighting. So we had a board member recommend to do that. The board adopted that 7-0. And so that was another expense of about $726,000. And then not too far after that, a well went out at the baseball softball facility, and we either have to do a whole new well, and then a board member thought we need to look into redoing the baseball softball outfields. That wasn't part of the regular bond project. So that was another 1.3.
Yeah, all but 26,000 of that was funded with county available funds. The board wanted to get all of that money out and use all of it.
So we did have some other expenditures outside of what we committed, in 2018. So just know that none of this was spent outside of board approval, nor outside of that we had planned it back in 2018. And I know the community sees the building and building and building. Trust me, I'm ready for it to be over too. But it was in 3 phases as well. So we started off phase 1, which we could do the track and the baseball field, and then we did the stadium, and then we moved to the CTE facility, and we couldn't take down the old ag building until the CTE facility was done. And so once it was done, we could move in from there, the kids, into the new building, and then we knocked down the old building, and then the last phase, which is the gym, which is going on now. Just takes a while. It took us about a year to draw up the plans because we didn't know if the bond would pass. So we had no plans as far as architecture. So just know that I know people think there's been building going on and we just keep adding more things to it, but that's not how it's gone. We had 3 phases planned all along, and we knew it was going to be a long process. And so anyway, just kind of a filler, just informational. Some of you may have been involved way back then and remember all that. Some of you weren't engaged in that. It kind of gives you a Cliff Note recap of that. Okay, go ahead, Liz. I didn't mean to butt in.
No, you're good. The only thing I really put about that is, that there was a planned $4 million use and considering that was 4 years ago, for it to be 4.5 instead of 4, I think that's pretty good considering inflation and everything else. If y'all don't have any questions on the general fund, you as the board is required to approve the child nutrition and the debt service fund, and I'll go through those real quick. But if you have anything else you want to know about the general fund.
What is the current balance of the fund balance?
I knew you were going to ask that. It's still like 21.8 million, I think, but I'm like blocked, but I'll go check in my office in just a minute.
It's not broke. They've had like a 6-month, 8-month window, is that right?
It's definitely a year. We in a normal year, we're probably looking at 18 million and we've got 20.
Is that 22 million after taking into account the
No.
deficit?
No, that would be where we ended last year. And I might be wrong. Well, let me go look because I wasn't prepared for that question.
Ron, after you take into account this year, it's going to knock that 21, 22, whatever it is, down to 19 to 20.
Mm-hmm.
Which is,
Plus 21.8.
but at one point, at
Let me
1.7,
double check because I've got a lot of numbers going on in my head right now.
So we were about-
I'll go
at
look.
1.7
Yeah.
million is what Liz has told me that it takes to operate the district outside of capital outlay. At 1.7 million, then that $20 million mark is about 12 months worth of operating.
Yeah,
We had
TEA requires 3 months. That's not a good practice. So, you want to do more like 9 to 12.
We had about roughly, give or take, 15 million when I got here in January of 2016. So we've increased that and then been able to take the bond and do the bond stuff and still maintain a pretty healthy fund balance and grow it a little bit. So that's a good thing.
I was going to say one other thing. I don't know. Okay, so 240 is child nutrition. And I gave y'all one of these for that as well. Y'all approved the budget on the function level, but this is down to the object level, which is more detailed than by function. So the object is the 6,100 payroll, 6,200 contracted services. So for the child nutrition, which is the cafeteria, then we are looking to add about 138,000 to that fund balance this year. And I budgeted for, to break even, but hopefully we will also add to the fund balance for child nutrition next year as well. Do you have any questions on that at all? Then 599, that's our debt service, and that is the money that we collect in taxes to pay our debt, which is to pay our bonds. We set the tax rate according to our bond payments every year. We want to make sure we collect enough, but we don't want to collect too much extra because then we would be setting the tax rate too high for our taxpayers. So for 21-22 actuals, I circled that number for y'all. 53,000 is what I think we will add to fund balance. We had 211,000 in there, so we will add to that. You do want to have a fund balance in that account a little bit so that if you decide to refinance your bonds or go out for another bond or do another bond sale, the ratings companies do look at that. But we did go down a penny this year because we didn't want to have too much to it. I may have one thing. I try to, when I come across things that I think might be valuable to y'all, that you might remember, that might be more meaningful to y'all than all this other stuff. The public education grant, Lamesa's never received any money from that. It's not a grant, it's part of an allotment. It's if you transfer kids from another school district that has a failing rating and they transfer to your school district, you get more money. So I don't know how many kids we have transferring in. Danielle probably knows.
Not off the top of my head and not from that particular county, but I know at least we have one family with 8 kids that are coming in. So, and then there's probably another maybe 4 or 5.
Yeah, so all those kids we get higher weighted funding on. So just something I thought y'all might think is interesting. That's something we've never gotten here in Lamesa before. Do y'all have any questions about anything with the budget adoption?
Oh, let me just say one thing. I appreciate her hard work, and she's really good at what she does. And these ladies back here, I know they came and they don't have to come, but they put in a lot. This summer is brutal for them, and then it becomes even more brutal as we hit September and they have to get ready for this audit. So kudos to y'all. They do all the grunt work in the back. No one gets to see what they do. No one gets to appreciate how hard they work and the hours they put in, but they're up here early and often, and I want to appreciate all of them and Liz. And then Richard worked hard on the HR, just making sure we got all the staff reductions done and we didn't replace anybody that wasn't, that we didn't have to have replaced, and we absorbed a lot of people. Appreciate the principals for not being greedy and saying, I need 10 TAs when they only really needed 8. So everybody working together, realizing, we have to trim the budget to get where we need to be. You got to realize about 2,000 kids 7 years ago or so. And we're sitting on what's our number? 16, close to 16?
We're close to 16.
1,600. So, that's 400 kids is a lot of money in our district. And you figure we have 320 transfer out of Lamesa, proper, our county, to the surrounding schools. So that's 700 plus kids that we're losing money on. Kids that left and people that didn't come back, and then the 300 or so that we have to transfer out. So, but that's kudos to our district and our people to get that balance, because the budget's probably be balanced in 6 weeks, most likely. So that's a positive thing. Anyway, kudos to you guys. Thank you for what you do. Don't tell you enough, and I'm bad about that. But thank you for in public. All you guys.
It's been a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess now consideration and possible action to adopt the 2022-23 Lamesa ISD budget.
Motion to adopt the 2022-2023 LISD budget.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Now we'll go into deliberation and closed session under Texas Government Code 551.074 to discuss possible candidates to be appointed to fill at-large trustee vacancy created by the resignation of trustee Cam Wade until the next trustee election in May 2023 when at-large term expires. Time now is 6:36. Yeah, we'll find out.
Here.
Hey,
Loving this.
there's right here, Rebecca, there's,
I know, I'm here too.
your iPad?
But,
Okay, the time now is 7:10 PM. We're coming back into open session and there is no action to be taken, so. Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn. Second.
All in favor? Aye. We all say aye.
I gave Ron a post-it note with the actual fund balance ending August 31st, 2022. It's just under 23 million, so. Couple million.
that was the end of May.
22.6.
22.
And that was August 31st of 2021.